There is a door in the floor of a house in central Turkey. A small door, ordinary looking, the kind of thing you might overlook entirely if you didn't know what it led to. But in 1963, a man renovating his home in the town of Derinkuyu pulled back a stone and found something that nobody, not historians, not archaeologists, not the Turkish government, had been expecting. Behind that door was a staircase, and the staircase went down and down and down again. What he had uncovered was not a cellar, not a cistern, not a buried room. What he had uncovered was an entire civilization pressed into the rock beneath his feet. Cappadocia sits in the middle of Anatolia, a high plateau in what is now central Turkey. From the air, it looks like something from another planet. Towers of pale stone rising from soft volcanic earth. Valleys carved by wind and time into strange, almost impossible shapes. People have lived here for thousands of years, drawn by the softness of the rock. A stone called tough, light enough to cut with hand tools but hard enough to hold its shape once exposed to air. For most of the ancient world, this place was simply the land between empires, passed through, fought over, traded across. But beneath its surface, something far more deliberate was happening. The volcanic landscape hid a secret that the people of Cappadocia had carried for centuries. They knew it was there. They had always known, but they had learned not to speak of it to outsiders. The tunnels below were not ruins to them. They were tools, emergency exits carved into the earth itself. The underground city of Derinkuyu is, by any measure, one of the most extraordinary engineering achievements ever found in the ancient world. And yet, for most of recorded history, it simply did not exist, at least not in any official record, any excavation report, any map. It was hidden beneath living houses, beneath churches, beneath the normal weight of everyday life. And it had been there, waiting for somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 years. Archaeologists who have studied the site estimate it could shelter as many as 20,000 people at once, not for a night, not for a week, for months. The city runs 18 stories deep into the earth, with enough space for livestock, food stores, wine presses, cooking areas, schools, and even a chapel carved directly into the stone. There are ventilation shafts that descend more than 50 meters, bringing fresh air to the lowest levels. There are wells that reach down to the water table below. There are narrow corridors designed to force any attacker to move in single file, making them easy to stop. And there are enormous circular stone doors weighing hundreds of kilograms each that could be rolled across passageways from the inside to seal off entire sections of the underground network. This was not built in a hurry. This was not improvised. Every detail speaks to a people who had thought very carefully about what it means to disappear. The question that has never been fully answered is not whether Derinkuyu was built. It is why anyone needed to build something like this at all. The history of Cappadocia is a history of pressure from every direction. The region sat at the crossroads of ancient trade routes, which meant it was also at the crossroads of ancient armies. Hittites, Phrygians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Byzantines, Mongols, Seljuks. Over centuries, the landscape above ground changed hands again and again. Each new power rewriting the name of the territory, rebuilding its temples, demanding its taxes. But the land itself did not belong to any of them. The land belonged to the rock, and the people who understood the rock. Some historians believe the first tunnels beneath Cappadocia were cut during the Bronze Age, perhaps as far back as the 2nd millennium BC, possibly by the Phrygians, who were known to carve their monuments and sanctuaries directly into stone. Others place the major expansion later, during the centuries when the region passed between Persian and Greek control. But almost every serious researcher agrees that the underground cities reached their fullest form during a specific period of intense pressure. The early centuries of the Common Era, when Christian communities in Anatolia faced repeated waves of persecution and invasion. This is where the underground city begins to reveal its true nature, not as a permanent home, not as a monument, but as a machine for survival. The earliest Christian communities in Cappadocia were small, fragile, and living in one of the most strategically important places in the ancient world. They were frequently caught between competing armies, between Roman authority and the social upheaval that followed the collapse of the Western Empire, between the expansion of Arab forces from the south and the uncertain protection of Constantinople to the northwest. They needed somewhere to go when the armies came, somewhere that could not be seen from the road, could not be entered by a large force, could not be burned or collapsed without enormous effort. The tunnels gave them all of that, and something more. Inside Derinkuyu, researchers found a large room on one of the upper levels that appears to have served as a religious school or meeting hall. It has a barrel-vaulted ceiling, carved with the same careful attention given to the rest of the complex. Nearby, on a lower level, there is a cross-shaped room that was almost certainly used as a chapel. The symbolism of the cross cut into the living rock, deep underground, in secret. It tells a story about the people who used this place. They were not just hiding their bodies, they were hiding their faith. And yet, the underground city was almost certainly not built by Christians. They inherited it, they expanded it, they adapted it for their particular needs. But the basic architecture, the shafts, the corridors, the stone rolling doors, the ventilation system, these appear to be far older than the Byzantine era. The genius of the design suggests a long tradition of underground building, refined over many generations, not invented by any single group in a moment of desperation. This is one of the things that makes Derinkuyu so difficult to fully understand. It did not have one builder and one purpose. It had layers of history pressed into its walls, each generation leaving its mark, its modifications, its own version of the question, how long do we have to stay down here? The ventilation system alone represents a kind of engineering that still draws attention from specialists. More than 50 shafts were cut through the rock at carefully calculated angles to ensure that fresh air could circulate through all 18 levels, even at the very bottom. Without this system, the city would have been uninhabitable below the first few floors. With it, thousands of people could breathe, cook, keep animals, and maintain fire in underground rooms for months at a time. The builders understood airflow in ways that are not always obvious, even in written engineering traditions from the same era. There are also the water systems. Wells were dug from within the underground city to reach water sources below the rock. Crucially, these wells could be sealed from below, from inside the underground complex, which meant that even if an enemy force found the entrance and tried to poison the water supply from above, the people below could cut off that access and use their own sealed sources. The level of strategic thinking embedded in this architecture is not accidental, it is methodical. The stone doors are perhaps the most quietly striking feature of the whole complex. Circular, shaped like giant wheels, some of them weighing hundreds of kilograms, they were placed at key points throughout the tunnel network. A single person could roll one into place across a corridor. But from the other side, from the side of someone trying to force their way in, they were almost impossible to move. They had no external handle, no exposed mechanism, no gap wide enough for a tool. The only way through was to smash the door itself, which meant alerting everyone on the other side and announcing that you had found them. Most invaders who knew of the tunnels would simply wait at the entrance, but you can only wait so long when an army has to keep moving. At its greatest extent, Derinkuyu was connected by tunnel to other underground settlements in the region. Cappadocia, another massive underground city located roughly 10 kilometers away, is linked to Derinkuyu through a tunnel that runs beneath the open ground between them. Archaeologists have confirmed sections of this connecting passage, though much of it remains unexcavated, Local tradition holds that many other underground settlements are connected across Cappadocia through a network that has never been fully mapped. Some researchers estimate that there may be as many as 200 underground sites scattered beneath the region, ranging from small family shelters to large multi-level complexes. Many of them are still being discovered. Some of them, almost certainly, have not been found at all. This is where the story becomes difficult to hold on to because it exceeds what maps and excavation reports can tell us. Imagine walking through Cappadocia on the surface: dry earth, strange stone formations, the occasional village, the open sky, and beneath all of it, beneath the farms and the roads and the terraced hillsides, an entire buried architecture, corridors and rooms and stairways and wells and chapels and storage chambers cut through the rock by human hands over hundreds of years, without machinery, without electricity, without any tools more sophisticated than iron picks and chisels. The sheer quantity of rock removed from beneath Cappadocia, the sheer volume of labor required to shape these spaces, is almost impossible to calculate. And most of it was done in secret, or at least in circumstances where the work could not be widely announced. When you stand at the entrance to Derinkuyu today, the staircase descends in front of you and the temperature immediately drops. The air becomes cool, slightly damp. Still, sound behaves differently underground. It flattens out, loses its edges, becomes something close to silence, punctuated only by the soft echo of footsteps and the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. The walls are close. The passages are narrow by design. Some of the corridors are low enough that a modern adult has to duck. The scale of the complex spread across those 18 levels means that the part tourists can visit today represents only a fraction of what exists. Large sections of Derinkuyu remain sealed, partially collapsed, or simply not yet excavated. The Turkish government has opened a portion of the site for visitors, but the majority of the underground city is still inaccessible. What lies in those sealed and unexplored sections is genuinely unknown. Archaeologists expect more rooms, more storage areas, more ventilation shafts. What they do not yet fully know is whether there are features of the lower levels that do not match what they have already documented, whether the deepest parts of the city hold something that has not yet been understood. The inhabitants who used Derinkuyu most intensively likely entered the tunnels during the Arab raids that swept through Anatolia repeatedly between the 7th and 9th centuries. Historical records from the Byzantine period describe the population of Cappadocia retreating underground when raiding forces approached, sometimes for weeks at a time, sometimes for longer. The raids were not random violence. They were part of a sustained conflict between the Byzantine Empire and the expanding Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates, a conflict that played out across decades and left entire regions depopulated or destroyed. Cappadocia, sitting in the path of these movements, bore a particular weight. For the communities who retreated below, the decision to go underground was not abstract. It meant bringing your animals down the ramps built specifically for them. It meant carrying your grain, your oil, your wine. It meant sealing the stone doors behind you and waiting in the dark, listening for sounds from above, knowing that the ventilation shafts that kept you alive could also carry voices downward. Your own voices, if you were not careful. The discipline required to maintain 20,000 people underground for any significant period of time goes beyond simple engineering. It required organization, hierarchy, rules, probably some kind of internal governance that maintained order in a space where panic could spread as quickly as fire. We know almost nothing about how that was structured because the people who lived it did not leave written records behind in the tunnels. They left tools, grinding stones, storage vessels, wine presses, and the chapel. They left the marks of their work on the walls, the precise angle of a carved staircase, the careful position of a ventilation shaft, but they did not leave accounts of what it was like to be there. That absence is part of what makes Derinkuyu so haunting. It is not a place that explains itself. It is a place that simply exists, massive and deliberate and silent, and asks you to work out what it means. The modern town of Derinkuyu sits above the underground city with no particular fanfare. It is a small town in central Anatolia, unremarkable from any distance. The entrance to the underground complex is marked now with a modest sign, a ticket booth, and the beginning of the stone staircase that leads visitors down into the rock. Most tourists who come to Cappadocia visit for the hot air balloons and the fairy chimneys and the cave hotels carved into the hillsides. The underground city is often a secondary destination, an afternoon rather than a journey. But the people who go down and stay for a while, who walk slowly through the narrow corridors and stop and look at the stone doors and try to imagine what it was like when those doors were last rolled shut, those people tend to come back up with something they did not bring in. There are still sections of the Cappadocia underground that have never been officially opened or surveyed. In recent years, construction work in nearby towns has occasionally broken through into unknown tunnel systems. Workers digging foundations and suddenly finding themselves looking into passages that descend into darkness. The same thing that happened to that homeowner in 1963 keeps happening on a smaller scale as the modern city sits unknowingly on top of a network that was never fully abandoned, never fully sealed, never fully understood. Researchers working in the region continue to produce new findings about the extent and complexity of the underground systems. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have suggested the presence of significant subterranean structures that have not yet been excavated. Some estimates place the total area of unexplored underground space beneath Cappadocia in the tens of thousands of square meters. These are not small gaps. They are rooms, corridors, possibly entire additional levels below what has already been documented. What is certain is that the known portions of Derinkuyu represent only a part of a much larger story, a story that the rock has not yet finished telling. The people who carved these tunnels could not have known that their work would survive long enough to be called ancient. They were not building for posterity. They were building for the next raid, the next army, the next season of danger. They were solving an immediate problem with the most permanent tool available to them, stone. And in solving it, they created something that outlasted every empire that ever threatened them. The raiders are gone. The armies are gone. The political structures that made this place a target are buried even deeper than the tunnels. But the tunnels remain, somewhere below the dry plateau of central Turkey, in a passage that has not seen light in centuries, in a room that was last used by someone whose name is completely lost to time. There is still air moving through a ventilation shaft cut by hand into the rock. It has been moving through that shaft for a very long time, and it will keep moving, regardless of what happens above. The door in the floor of a house in Derinkuyu changed everything, but there are other doors. Some of them have not been found yet.